The book was sort of born about a decade ago. That was when I first conceived of the idea after another experience of grief, actually.
Hmm.
And I started writing it in 2020 with around the same time as the George Floyd riots and things like that. And it took me about 6 months to write, all in all. But I would say that definitely the process of writing it was a decade or more long. So,
You mentioned sort of that new kind of loss that in terms of when we talk about the names of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Could you elaborate a little bit about that? What do you mean by, as you describe, a new kind of loss? What do you mean by that?
yeah, so I would say that Probability as a book is inspired by each of the significant sort of losses in my life. There was the one when I was 5 with my uncle. There was one when I was a little bit older as a teenager. And there was one, well, I think that as a society, we all sort of grieved the loss of those precious lives, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. And I think that the idea of different types of loss and different stages of loss, that really appealed to me. There's loss as a child, so childhood loss. There's loss as an older person, an adult. And there's also loss, a communal sense of loss. And I think that I wanted to touch on all three when I was writing this book, because I think they all have different facets, and the ways that we grieve those and approach those are significantly different. And I hoped to convey loss in all those different ways in the book.
I'm curious, did your feelings towards grief evolve through that period, even from the inception of the book, through your own personal grief, through what society was grieving as well? Did your relationship with grief change and evolve?
I think it really did. I think the perspective on grief is probably the biggest thing that changes. It starts with, childhood. You have this very myopic view of what loss is, and there's kind of a baffling sort of sentiment to, like, where did this person go, and what happened, that kind of thing that happens when you're a child. And then as you get a little bit older, there might be more emotion attached, the different phases of grief. And then grieving as a society, I think, for sure, as a Black person who was sort of watching the George Floyd debacle, it was heartbreaking and frustrating. And I think that those elements can definitely be a huge part of grief. Grief isn't just the sadness or the mourning or the loss. It's also sometimes anger, and it's disbelief, and it's confusion. And I hoped to bring all those things together in the book.
As we know, grief does not discriminate. Dealing with grief when you're younger can look quite different from grieving as an adult. What are some of the nuances you had to take into consideration when writing about grief for a younger audience? Because this book is geared towards a younger audience.
I think that a lot of times people think that the books that are written for young people have to sort of be dumbed down or watered down. And it was really important to me that not only was that not the case, but that it was written in a way that is honest and truthful to the experience of grief, but also something that would open up conversation between kids and their parents and the people around them. So definitely, I hoped that through the book, kids would find sort of the language to discuss elements of grief, to express, oh, this sounds like what I was going through, or even the parts of the book that are a little less heavy, things like building a time capsule and family time and things like that. So I hope that there were those different layers that would appeal to children.